even some 20s over the suburbs.
Very warm welcome to Amishakil 5858. I am Ahmed Shackle. Following are the latest news headlines which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Asian, African and Australian news channels and all other news agencies. So please, let's go to the news.
Tonight, Pope Leo XIV outlining some of his priorities and making his first trip outside the Vatican. An earthquake rattles parts of the South, and could there be a breakthrough in the trade war as officials from the U.S. and China meet face to face? First, Pope Leo laying out his vision for the future of the Church, what he said in a meeting with cardinals about his priorities, including the threat of AI, making his first visit outside of the Vatican to a shrine in the tomb of the late Pope Francis, the first American pontiff embraced by his hometown of Chicago, and our team in a small town in Peru that also claims him as their own. Terry Moran from the Vatican tonight. A 4.1 magnitude earthquake shaking the southern U.S., its epicenter in Tennessee, but felt as far away as Atlanta. How common are quakes of this size in this region, and the threat of aftershocks in the days ahead? The U.S. and China sitting down for high-stakes talks overseas, the first time since the start of President Trump's trade war. What we know about the meetings as the impact hits American ports and the fate of the global economy hangs in the balance. Selena Wang from the White House tonight. India and Pakistan agree to an American-brokered ceasefire, a break in the tense standoff, as Europe's leaders lend their support for a temporary truce in Ukraine. The reaction from the Trump administration and Moscow. More delays and cancellations at Newark Airport after a third brief outage. The growing concerns over America's aging infrastructure. The White House intensifies its immigration crackdown, saying they are considering the suspension of a fundamental constitutional right. The Timberwolves investigate after two of their fans are accused of racially charged comments. And baby boom, the hospital in Wisconsin, and what many of the nurses in the labor and delivery ward have in common with the patients. From ABC News World Headquarters in
Joining us now, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Sir, congratulations to you, and thank you for giving us a little bit of your time here on this Saturday evening. Greatly appreciate it. I want to start with just getting your take on what we just witnessed, some of that video there, but also the comments from Acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, on this democratic action that we saw yesterday outside of the New Jersey ICE facility. Take a listen.
The reality of the situation is there are rapists, murderers in there. So this whole political points game, I'm really not in line with. And you got to just enforce the law. That's my job. If you break the law, it will be enforced no matter who you are.
Todd, I want to get your thoughts. Is it politics at play here? Are Democrats pulling stunts, essentially, showing their priorities are illegal immigrants over the safety of American citizens? And what charges could they potentially face? There is body cam footage here that can be looked at as well. Todd.
For sure. I very much agree with the U.S. Attorney, with Alina Habba and what she said. What happened yesterday was horrible. And the mayor going in, literally storming into a federal facility with detainees, many of whom are violent criminals, and then repeatedly ignoring multiple law enforcement officers asking him to leave. He had no right to be there. And you had congressmen as well physically assaulting law enforcement. It was a horrible display. I feel terrible for our law enforcement officers who are working every day to keep this country safe, that they had to go through that. And this Department of Justice, General Bondi and I have talked multiple times. I've talked with the U.S. Attorney on multiple occasions since yesterday. What happened yesterday was a very sad day for this country, and we will respond in kind, for sure.
Todd, this is David Webb. Now,
We know the DOJ has launched a criminal investigation into New York AG Attorney General Letitia James over alleged mortgage fraud, and she's being accused of listing as her primary residence in violation of New York law as being in Virginia, despite her being that elected official in New York. Now, she's blaming the whole thing on the Trump administration. Watch this.
This is nothing more than an extension of his revenge, his retribution, and he finally got up to the J's. I am not fearful. I am fearless.
So where does this case stand right now, and what kind of penalties could Letitia James face? Look, I'm not going to comment on an ongoing criminal investigation. It wouldn't be proper for me to do so. I will say that the Attorney General of New York has literally spent her entire career going after the President of the United States and his entire family. So it's pretty ironic.
Tonight, the new Pope surprises the world, stepping outside of the Vatican for the first time since his election. The first ever U.S.-born pontiff making two unexpected appearances, one of them at the tomb of Pope Francis, plus his message to cardinals today, the latest from the Vatican tonight. An earthquake rattles the south from Tennessee to Georgia. Did we have an earthquake? Why this one caught people off guard, and why one expert tells us a quake like this is relatively rare. Critical talks underway to find an end to the trade war between the U.S. and China, where the negotiations stand tonight. Breaking news, a shaky ceasefire between India and Pakistan after a week of fighting, but will it hold? We're tracking late developments. And the Pope of Peru. We're in the city Chiclayo to find out more about Pope Leo's special connections to the people there.
This is NBC Nightly News with Jose T.
Tonight, President Trump praised as a peacemaker amid escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Today's surprise ceasefire follows days of cross-border attacks.
I'm Raimi Inocencio, and actions speak louder than words. Hours after Trump's post on his Truth Social platform, blasts rocked at least two cities in Indian-administered Kashmir.
Also tonight, new hope for fire federal workers. A judge ordering a pause to the government.
I wouldn't do it, frankly. I don't think they're going to be doing it.
Trade war tsunami. U.S. and Chinese negotiators meet for the first time as tariff costs hit U.S. ports.
Emily's Preston at the Port of Los Angeles, where workers are feeling the pain. What's next for consumers?
Airport chaos as Newark's troubles mount. United CEO weighs in.
It absolutely is safe at Newark and in the entire country. And the reason is, when these kind of outages happen, we train for them, we have backup procedures.
Truly American, Leo the 14th's unexpected ancestry.
I'm Katie Weiss in New Orleans, where state records reveal the new Pope's Creole roots.
And in our weekend journal, Kids Conclave, CBS's Noel Brennan shows us how these Chicago students learned valuable lessons picking their new Pope.
I think you got to be kind, respectful, be Pope of the people.
This on this Saturday night, a ceasefire deal in doubt. Hours after India and Pakistan announced a truce, new explosions rattle the volatile and densely populated region.
What happens next can be really devastating.
The stakes and the accusations. A new push to pause the fighting in Europe's bloodiest battlefield. Ukraine, backed by Western allies, offers a 30-day ceasefire. A cross-border gesture turning heads in Montreal. Why Americans traveled north to make peace with their pocketbooks. And the dog who won't stay down. This is Oscar. Left for dead, but now stealing hearts. How Oscar got his second chance.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Nico Garza.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After a hopeful start to the day, relations between between two nuclear-armed rivals appear to be holding on by a thread. India is accusing Pakistan tonight of violating a U.S.-brokered ceasefire the two nations signed early this morning, a claim Islamabad has denied. The deal would have paused days of deadly clashes and the largest flare-up in violence between the countries in decades. Now, concerns are growing over the future of the conflict and the potential ripple effects around the world. Taria Isri has tonight's top story.
Shelling lights up the night sky, threatening to undo a fragile agreement.
This is a breach of the understanding arrived at.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, tensions remain high as India and Pakistan agree to a ceasefire following the most serious fighting between these nuclear powers in decades. Then, as the Trump administration looks to boost deep-sea mining, we discover how little of the ocean seafloor humans have ever seen. And how a chance encounter turned into a 22-year journey documenting the life's work of a remarkable Ugandan photographer.
The range of response from sheer adulation to exuberance to shock that these pictures somehow resurfaced was all on display, and it was incredible.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak here on France 24. Our headlines this hour. Vladimir Putin proposes direct ceasefire talks with Ukraine to begin in Turkey this week with no preconditions. French President Emmanuel Macron responded, saying the proposal was a first step, but not enough. He and other Western leaders have called for an unconditional ceasefire lasting 30 days. Just hours after agreeing to a ceasefire, India and Pakistan accuse each other of violating the deal. It was brokered swiftly by the U.S. on Saturday as the two nuclear powers continued escalating their cross-border attacks. And Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces escalates drones from 28 on a prison. We report on the eastern city of Port Sudan, the seat of the army government that has become a front line in the civil war.
Nation is
Standard and green education on the cards.
But, as it's revealed, a migrant housing businessman has become a billionaire off the back of taxpayer money. Is Labour really prepared to make changes?
Elsewhere, Russian President Vladimir Putin calls for direct talks with Ukraine for the first time since the war began. That's after Prime Minister Starmer joined European allies in Kyiv.
Should be an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, that should be without conditions, because Putin has responded by putting in conditions. We've rejected those today, but equally saying we will coordinate a response in terms of sanctions, should that not be the case.
Explosions over Kashmir jeopardizing the India-Pakistan ceasefire just hours after it was agreed.
The issue now is to make that an enduring and lasting ceasefire, because this is a very concerning situation.
Pope Leo XIV prepares to lead his first Sunday prayer after sharing his controversial views on AI.
The Duchess of Sussex appoints new chief of staff. You'll never guess who their last boss was.
Obesity could be draining our brains. That's an alarming development as overweight teenagers are issued a damning health warning.
Should it be a criminal offence if you don't recycle exactly as your council specifies? We'll debate that later.
Good morning. Manchester City slip up in the race for a Champions League place after their goalless draw at Southampton, who avoided the unwanted distinction of being the worst Premier League side ever. And in tennis, Yannick Sinner makes a triumphant return to the court after his 3-month drugs ban.
After yesterday's widely dry start to the weekend, there's the chance of a few more showers around today. Join me later to find out if you're likely to see any.
Just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Sophie Reaper. This is GP News Breakfast.
On CMA. This is Asia Now.
Good afternoon. It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 New Delhi, and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakia Silveraji. Your headlines this hour. Explosions heard in India-administered Kashmir hours after India and Pakistan say they agreed to an immediate ceasefire following days of deadly cross-border attacks. New Delhi says Islamabad violated the truce. US President Donald Trump hails talks with China, saying the two sides negotiated a total reset in a friendly but constructive manner. Senior US and Chinese officials resume discussions for a second round later today. South Korea's Conservative People Power Party reinstates ex-Labour Minister Kim Won-soo as its presidential candidate less than a day after announcing a replacement. He has registered for the election, pledging to make South Korea a, quote, great country.
Good morning. It is 6 a.m. on today's program. One of the country's leading hospitals accused of covering up concerns about a surgeon for almost a decade.
And Chelsea become the first Women's Super League side to complete an unbeaten 22-game season on their way to achieving a record points total in the league.
Sunday, the 11th of May. A surgeon suspended and hundreds of surgeries under review at Adam Brooks Hospital in Cambridge.
And I've been told that if she had done something sooner, or even attempted to do something sooner, then he probably would have stood a bit better chance than what he's currently going through.
Vladimir Putin calls for direct talks with Ukraine without preconditions after being threatened with further sanctions if the Kremlin doesn't comply with a 30-day ceasefire. India and Pakistan accuse each other of violating an hours-old truce after days of cross-border strikes. The government vows to end a free market experiment in immigration as the Home Secretary rolls out reforms.
Premier League goals away.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for being with us on the breakfast programme. One of the country's leading hospitals has been accused of covering up concerns about a surgeon for almost a decade. Kuldeep Storm was suspended from Adam Brooks Hospital in January this year after a review found issues with some of her surgeries. It's now reviewing the care of 800.
Today, a former frontbencher dumped from cabinet accuses the Deputy Prime Minister of wielding factional power.
I think when people look at a Deputy Prime Minister, they expect to see a statesman, not a factional assassin.
India and Pakistan accuse each other of violating a ceasefire just hours after it came into effect. A dramatic drug bust. Police seized more than $500 million worth of cocaine off the New South Wales mid-north coast. And the new Pope makes his first trip outside the Vatican to talk to senior church leaders. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. Dumped frontbencher of the
Africa News. The news. A It's been wonderful. It's
Ugandan opposition leader and pop star Bobi Wine has announced he'll run for president again in the upcoming 2026 elections scheduled for January. The 43-year-old, whose real name is Robert Kyagulanyi, will challenge long-serving President Yoweri Museveni, who's expected to seek re-election at 80. Wine previously ran in 2021, coming second, but rejected the results, alleging widespread fraud, ballot stuffing and violence against his supporters. Government officials have denied the allegations. In his announcement, Wine emphasised that the election would be a fighting opportunity to expose what he calls the regime's corruption and injustices and to galvanise Ugandans to stand up for their freedom. He also sharply criticised Western governments for not speaking out against human rights abuses in Uganda, including the torture and illegal detention of his supporters. If elected, Wine says his top priorities will include restoring political freedoms, cracking down on corruption, and addressing the regime's abuses of power. Tensions between India and Pakistan are intensifying, with both countries accusing each other of firing missiles at military air bases. The confrontation marks the most serious escalation yet in a conflict sparked by a deadly gun massacre last month.
It is Pakistani actions that have constituted provocation and escalation. In response, and I repeat, in response, India has defended and reacted in a responsible and measured fashion to these provocations and these escalations by the Pakistani side.
India says it's committed to avoiding further escalation if Pakistan also holds back. Officials in New Delhi say precision strikes were carried out only on clearly identified military targets.
Indian armed forces carried out precision attacks only on identified military targets. These included technical infrastructure, command and control centers, radar sites and weapon storage areas.
Pakistan's military released a video showing missiles being launched from mobile systems. While the footage couldn't be verified, state media claims India attacked 3 Pakistani air bases. The US and other global powers are urging both sides to step back. In Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin held high-level talks with Egypt and Brazil's leaders following the Victory Day parade as Russia marked 80 years since the defeat of Nazi Germany. Egypt is one of Russia's key partners in Africa. According to the results of last year, bilateral trade turnover increased by more than 30%, reaching a record $9 billion, and in the first 2 months of this year, it grew by more than 80%. The Russian-Egyptian Intergovernmental Commission is active. The implementation of major joint projects continues, and we are confident that we will move forward in all these areas. Our countries coordinate approaches to current international issues, including the situation in the Middle East. In response, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi welcomed stronger ties with Moscow, saying both countries share common goals in regional stability and economic development.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Have a good life. Bye-bye.